Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my week in books. It's a frosty, chilly morning. It's going to be a frosty, chilly week, and so I just thought it would be fun to share all the literature that I'm going to be reading, analyzing, and just loving in this first week of December. So this week, it was my turn to lead staff devotions at the school that I teach at. And since it's December and we're entering the season of Advent, I chose to read some Advent poems along with a few verses from Scripture every day in the morning with my coworkers. So this morning we read The Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. Tomorrow we will read Christ's Nativity by Henry Vaughan. On Wednesday we will read Hark the Herald Angels Sing by Charles Wesley. On Thursday we're going to read In Memoriam, A.H.H. obit, and then huge Roman numeral number. I'm not quite sure how the title of this poem works, but it's a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson, and I really love it. I even put it on the back of my Christmas cards this year. And then finally, on Friday, we will be looking at The Burning Babe by Robert Southwell, S.J. Just to give some context for the Tennyson poem, for example. In Memoriam, 106, by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Ring out, wild bells, to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that hear we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause, and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life, with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out, my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride and place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. I love this Lord Tennyson poem, and I'm looking forward to kind of picking through it and identifying what the coming of Christ is ushering into the world in this poem. This just arrived in the mail. Beautiful copy of Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. I'm not sure whether I want to read this quickly before my husband gets back from his trip, or whether I want to wrap it up and put it under the Christmas tree for him right away. I'm really tempted to read through it first. Then it was time to head out for a walk. I'm listening to The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, narrated by David McDuff on Spotify audiobooks. When I got home, I started making a special Christmas trail mix while still listening to the podcast. I'm finding it much easier to follow along with the storyline and get to know the characters in The Brothers Karamazov listening to it on audiobook, but it is trickier sometimes to keep up with the philosophical ideas and the debates and arguments going on between characters. What I love most about this book by Dostoevsky is the complexity of Ivan Karamazov's worldview and the implications of his worldview, and the simplicity of Alyosha's worldview, and it's really interesting to see how these two characters live out their worldviews. But I also really love reading their discussions, and I think I can get more out of that actually reading the book in print, so I might need to return to that soon. And then I took a little break to read Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. I'm just gonna do it. My husband's home in about a week. I'll have it read and wrapped by then so he can open it for Christmas. After a few hours in the fridge, the trail mix is ready to go. I'm gonna put it in this cute Christmas container and bring it to work tomorrow for my coworkers. And then before bed, I read Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology again. This week, we started our study of Beowulf in my medieval history class. My students and I are very aware of how Tolkien was influenced by Beowulf and Anglo-Saxon literature in general. And so as we've been reading through, we've been coming across things that remind us of Tolkien and then getting all excited and wondering, did this inspire Tolkien? For example, there's a funeral scene at the beginning of Beowulf that reminded us of Boromir's funeral. They put him on the boat with his weapons and then let him float down the river. Obviously, we can't really know for sure, but the similarity is there, which is pretty cool, and we're looking forward to just enjoying this awesome wintry Anglo-Saxon poem. And it's really cool. Our edition of Beowulf has the lines written in Old English right beside modern English. I've asked my students to memorize at least 10 lines and recite to the class, and one of my students actually wants to do it in the Old English, so that'll be really cool. And we're also reading Robin Hood. We've been reading this for several weeks now. These are just really fun, good-spirited stories, classic standoffs between the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood. My class is mostly made up of boys, and they just eat these stories up. And of course, as we're reading, we're discussing questions of justice, such as, is it okay to steal from the rich to give to the poor? In other words, do the ends justify the means? I also gave a history lecture today based on Susan Wise Bower's The Story of the World, Volume 2, The Middle Ages for Grade 8 level. So my first master's level history essay is ready for submission, and I'm so nervous about this. This is a primary source analysis on crofters and cotters, on the West Highland colonization of Canada, having to do with the colonization scheme for crofters and cotters from Scotland to be sent to settle land in parts of Canada, specifically Manitoba. So I analyzed a bunch of command reports, British parliamentary papers, and yeah, I think it's a decent paper. But I'm just so nervous about submitting it. You can't go back. And I feel like I just go over it again and again, constantly refining it, constantly trying to make it better. But that's a certain point, it's just, you can't. You just need to accept that it is what it is and hand it in and be done with it and move on with your life. I can't keep doing this. Yeah, like this isn't even my thesis, so I need to chill out a bit and just submit it. And I did my very best. This is my first semester, so even if I don't get the best grade possible, hopefully I will learn a lot from the experience and get some good feedback so I can do better next semester. So I'm just trying to have that positive attitude toward growth about this. Especially tricky just getting used to the UK standards of grading. They say that you get a 70 on a paper from a UK university like Edinburgh, that counts as a distinction. But to translate that kind of into North American standards, you're looking at a 90. So there's like a 20% difference with how they grade. It's really interesting. Apparently, students who get, 70s on their theses out in the UK can still go on to study at the top universities in the States. So that's kind of encouraging, but also a 70 to me is a very low mark. I would have cried if I got a 70 during my undergrad. So to think of getting a 70 on this essay that I've worked so hard on is just a little bit discouraging and sad, but it is what it is, and I have done my best. Today I encountered some of the most beautiful lines of prose in the Silmarillion. Tolkien writes this: Manwë has no thought for his own honor, and is not jealous of his power, but rules all to peace. The Vanyar he loves best of all the elves, and of him they received song and poetry. For poetry is the delight of Manwë, and the song of words is his music. His raiment is blue, and blue is the fire of his eyes, and his scepter is of sapphire, which the Noldor wrought for him. And he was appointed to be the vice-regent of Iluvatar, king of the world of Valar and elves and men, and the chief defense against the evil of Melkor. And of Ulmo, Tolkien writes this: In the deep places he gives thought to music great and terrible, and the echo of that music runs through all the veins of the world in sorrow and in joy. For if joyful is the fountain that rises in the sun, its springs are the wells of sorrow unfathomed at the foundations of the earth. And on my Christmas book wish list are the following titles: Rembrandt is in the Wind, Learning to Love Art Through the Eyes of Faith by Russ Ramsey. Dominion, How the Christian Revolution Remade the World by Tom Holland. The Abolition of Man, How Education Develops Man's Sense of Morality by C.S. Lewis. And On Reading Well, Finding the Good Life Through Great Books by Karen Swallow Prior. I want to read a few more passages from the Silmarillion that just really struck me as profoundly beautiful. From the section on the beginning of days, it talks about how Iluvatar decided to give men a new and unique gift that he would not give to the elves. Tolkien writes this: Therefore he, Iluvatar, willed that the hearts of men should seek beyond the world and should find no rest therein, but they should have a virtue to shape their life amid the powers and chances of the world, beyond the music of the Einar, which is as fate to all things else. And of their operation everything should be, in form and deed, completed, and the world fulfilled until the last and smallest. Later he calls this the gift of freedom, that the children of men dwell only a short space in the world alive, and are not bound to it, and depart soon, whither the elves know not, whereas the elves remain until the end of days, and their love of earth and all the world is more single and more poignant, therefore, and as the years lengthen ever more sorrowful. For the elves die not till the world dies, unless they are slain or waste in grief, and to both these seeming deaths they are subject. Neither does age subdue their strength, unless one grow weary of 10,000 centuries. But the sons of men die indeed, and leave the world. Therefore they are called the guests, or the strangers. Death is their fate, the gift of Iluvatar, which as time wears even the powers shall envy. But Melkor has cast his shadow upon it, and confounded it with darkness, and brought forth evil out of good, and fear out of hope. Yet of old the Valar declared to the elves in Valinor that men shall join in the second music of the Einar, whereas Iluvatar has not revealed what he purposes for the elves after the world's end, and Melkor has not discovered it. I just think the idea of death actually being a gift, and that it's better to yearn for another world and yearn for what comes after death than to be confined to this broken world forever. And I think that's something that we so often forget. And that's the hope that Christians have in a better world and a better life after death. We're not confined to this world, and this world is not the end, and this isn't even our home. We are strangers, and we're moving towards a better place. I also want to really briefly share some thoughts on some of the books that I've been reading, just for some lighter reading throughout the week. So the first one here is The Story Girl by L.M. Montgomery. So this book is set in the same world as Anne of Green Gables. It's set on the shores of Prince Edward Island, and the rustic farmhouses and the quaint little towns. So as is the case in all of Montgomery's work, there's just some profoundly beautiful imagery and attention to the changing of the seasons and the land. Anyways, this book is essentially just a series of adventures between a group of cousins, the King cousins, some that have traveled from Toronto to spend some time on Prince Edward Island, and also just their neighbors and kids that are living around them in the town. The central character is Sarah Stanley, who is this masterful storyteller. She's 14 years old, but she can weave tales, and often her tales get her and her cohorts in trouble, but they also just add charm and adventure and magic to their slow, simple lives on the island. And so yeah, this is just a very delicate, pretty read. I mean, look at the next chapter that I need to read, chapter 22, The Dream Books. Ugh, just the sound of that, so lovely. And then I've also been reading Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I'm not all the way through, but I'm almost there, so I'll probably finish this up tonight or tomorrow night. I have mixed thoughts about this book, actually. I can't say that I really love Neil Gaiman's style of writing. It just doesn't slide off my tongue or slide in my mind correctly. There's something about it that's just not my favorite. And so far, I'm finding this world of Norse mythology kind of incoherent and illogical and just kind of bizarre. I don't find the characters very appealing or the stories and the myths very interesting, if I'm being completely honest, and I was not expecting that. I was expecting to love this collection. What I consider the Norse world, just it feels like home to me, right? The cold, the mountains, the icy seas. I'm from Canada. I feel like I can relate to Scandinavia on some level. I was expecting to really, really love these and relate to these. I'm just not really. I think I much prefer to read the Greek and Roman myths and mythology. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting to come to that conclusion, but that's okay. And maybe it's just Neil Gaiman's work, and if I read the myths in their original forms, I would enjoy them more. That's very possible, so maybe I just need to do that. But still, of course, some elements of Norse mythology are super fascinating. I find Odin, the Allfather, to be kind of the most compelling and interesting character. The Valkyries, the Soul Gatherers, and the whole idea of Ragnarok, the end of days, this great battle that's going to take place. Yeah, there's still something in there that draws me in and fascinates me, but overall, I'm not really loving this book. So when I've done it, I'm going to wrap it up and add it to the pile of books under our Christmas tree for Zach to open for Christmas, and hopefully he'll get more out of it than I have so far. The rest of my weekend, what's it looking like? I probably won't include my weekend activities in this vlog, but I will be beginning to prepare lessons on Plato's Republic, which I will be teaching in the next few weeks, and Art in the Bible by Francis Schaeffer. And I also want to read through T.S. Eliot's essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, because my students have been arguing a lot at school about what constitutes copying when it comes to art and literature and what constitutes just inspiration. How can you be inspired by your favorite author and their works and have that impact who you are as a writer and the works that you write without it being just copying? How can you be original but also be inspired by your favorite artists? It's not possible to be fully original because we are what has influenced us. And that's always going to come out in our art and in the things that we do and in every part of our lives. But my mind, hearing these conversations, just harken back to T.S. Eliot's essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, and how in this great conversation of Western literature, writers have constantly built off of each other and interacted with each other's work, and that's okay, and that's good, and that's all part of it. Anyways, I just want to review that essay, and I've already shared it with my Keener students so that they can also look into it a little bit deeper. And so, yeah, it's about my weekend in literature is looking like. Hopefully I'll continue to read from The Story Girl as well, and Norse mythology, finish it up. Be nice to read some more of the Silmarillion, because every time I come to it, I leave in just complete awe and admiration for Tolkien, and just in love with his prose, which is wonderful. And that is the end of this vlog, so thank you so much for watching. Please do like this video and comment your thoughts. Comment if you read any of these books. Comment if you have any reading recommendations for me, and subscribe to my channel as well. And if you're interested, you can find my book on Amazon, A Portrait of the Malefactress as a Young Woman. I really, really appreciate your support, guys. It means so much to me that I'm able to keep doing YouTube, because there's nothing I love more than talking about books and romanticizing my life with books and just sharing things that I love with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do that for a long time. So thank you again so much for watching this video and just for being here. God bless and have a great Christmas season.